body awareness is challenging, and it's something we build along with building our strength and our flexibility. And our spine is the hardest part. It's easy to copy shapes with our arms and legs, but our spine is long. It has 3 different curves. They're all different. They all move differently. To move our spine, we've got to use so many different muscles. On top of that, we're coming into our exercise with slightly different postural types anyway. Some of us are already pretty straight with our back. Some of us have really big curves in our spine. Some of us even have scoliosis where we have extra sideways curves. So when we're doing our movements and when we're asked to straighten our back or curve our back or side bend, we think we're doing it correctly, but sometimes we need that extra feedback, yeah? So I suggest doing this next to a mirror if you can as well, so you can actually see what you're doing with your spine and relate that back to how it feels, because unless you're exercising next to a mirror all the time, we don't have that visual feedback, so it's building that body awareness. So let's start by lying down on our back, completely straight. Now just lie, try not to change anything. And that's pretty much sort of what your body likes to do, right? We're using the floor for feedback here. The floor is straight, right? Now when we're lying in this position, if we had perfect textbook posture, our lower back is close to, but not squished in to the floor. Our back of the neck has a small curve, again, not too big, but not squished into the floor. Upper body nice and relaxed, and that's what we would call neutral spine. However, throughout our life, we might have ended up with some tight hip flexors or some tight shoulders, and we're noticing that here. So let's go through and explore some different positions using the floor for feedback. So if you check in with your lower back, you should be able to slide your hands underneath. It's not like there's a huge gap, you sort of got to wiggle them underneath. But if you've got your lower back completely flat already, that might be a sign that you maybe tuck your bum under a little bit too much. And that's quite common if you've had a lower back injury. We sort of tuck or straighten our lower back slightly too much as a little bit of a protection thing. So make sure you're sort of relaxing your abs, let it go. Notice how your lower back wants to curve slightly away from the floor. That's our neutral and our strongest position. And then we've also got our head and neck position. We all get tense in our neck and shoulders a little bit, and that can cause a little bit of forward head posture, or that sense that our chin is jutting forward. So if you feel a little bit tense already in the back of the neck, or even just to feel the difference, if we pick up our head, just bring our chin in a little bit and then relax it back down. So we've physically adjusted it, and you might notice that you can feel a slight engagement of your neck muscles just to sort of be there. And that might be an indication that you do have a slightly forward head posture sometimes, and that's really common. It's hard to work at the computer or do a lot of driving without poking our head forward. So in Pilates, I'd often say, feel like you've got a little bit of a double chin, yeah, that slight chin tuck feeling. All right, let's think about our shoulders and our upper body. Let's take our arms up to vertical and just notice we can sort of round our shoulders away, and then we can put our upper back as flat as possible on the mat, yeah? And then once you've got your upper back as flat as possible on the mat, just let your arms relax, palms up. Our shoulders will curl slightly away from the floor, like that. That's totally fine. It's more our spine that we're thinking about and being relaxed in this position. Now this is our neutral, right? So we've got a small curve in our lower back, our upper back rounds slightly the opposite way, and we've got a small curve in our neck as well. But that is correct, yeah? We've got the feedback of the floor to notice those curves of the spine. Now, when we're exercising, sometimes we're neutral, sure, but a lot of the time we're moving. We might be asked to flatten our back or extend our back or side bend. So use the floor for a little bit of feedback here. Let's go closer together at the front, and our lower back flattens into the floor, and then relax it. You're really using your abdominals to do that, but using your rib cage is really important because a lot of us just tuck our pelvis and we don't move our rib cage at all. So it's ribs and hips coming together, and that takes quite a bit of work with our legs out straight. So it's a good place to feel that, and that's most of your abdominal work. Yeah, rounding your lower spine, or even in plank, you're asked to engage your abdominals at the front to have your lower back straight. Yeah, and then part of our rib cage awareness is really important as well. If we take our arms up to vertical, that upper back flat thing, notice we've got just nice neutral position here. We don't want our rib cage popping up to the ceiling. If you try that, take your arms back, notice that depending on your shoulder flexibility, as it gets closer and closer to the floor, it gets harder and harder to not let your rib cage pop up to the ceiling. And practice that a few times, but you've also got to allow your shoulders to lift up as your arms go overhead. Good. Now that's using the floor for feedback, and sometimes if you do feel a little bit tired or tight in your back at the end of the day, just lying flat on the floor, firm surface for a few minutes can be really helpful. You can make those little adjustments, a little bit of chin in for nearly everyone. Nearly everyone pokes their head forward a little bit, and most common is sometimes too much arch in the lower back, we might need to, but some people are too flat, and we don't want them to excessively lift their back, but they might need to just relax and make sure they're not tucking their bum under all the time. Now our spine is designed to move all different directions. It's when we excessively try and hold it in one position that we end up with issues. Yeah, it's more the movement that we're looking for. Alright, let's come into a hands and knees position. And again, this is where you really want to be next to the mirror, right? Now, if you, without looking in the mirror, try and get your back where you think it's nice and straight, and then check out how you went. Yeah, so that gives you a little bit of feedback already for where you think straight is and where it actually is. So let's try and get our spine completely straight, not neutral. So that means a little bit of a double chin feel. If there was a mirror on the floor, we're going to have a double chin. To get our lower back completely straight, remember, like we did on the floor, we've actually used our ribs and hips and our abdominals to straighten our lower back, and we have to actually relax our upper back to get it nice and straight as well. So starting from that straight spine position, let's practice rounding our spine. So think of tucking your bum down towards the floor, or your tailbone down, rounding your lower back, pulling your front ribs in, and then pressing up in between your shoulder blades. And notice your head hangs down a little bit as well. And then if we come back to a straight back, start with the tailbone, roll through, relax in the upper back, and then bring your head back to that double chin feeling. Practice that a few times, but use the mirror, yeah? And instead of just moving the whole spine up and down in one piece, I find it very helpful to start with your tailbone, do your lower back, then your upper back, then your head. Same thing on the way back, start with your tailbone, then your upper back, then bring your head back into your position. Good. And then let's move the other way. So starting from our straight back position, let's move into extension. So it feels like we're sticking our bum up in the air, we're relaxing or curving our upper back, then we relax in between our shoulder blades, and then we can lift our head. So our whole back is curving. And then come back to your straight spine position. Extending, feel how you gotta let your abs go and you can feel your back muscles work. But notice, from looking at me or looking at yourself, for most of us, it's not a huge back bend, and also that our lower back likes to extend and we find it easy, but the upper back doesn't change much, but we can really flip our head backwards, right? So that's why it's tricky, because we're trying to move our whole spine, but each section of the spine moves differently. Good. Now I do want to address plank position, right? Because when we do plank, it is to strengthen all the muscles around your waist, but specifically your abdominals. So when you do plank, it is engage your abdominals, make your lower back completely straight, and use your mirror, and practice that position. We can step one leg back, check that we've got our lower back straight, step the other leg back, use your mirror, lower back nice and straight, and then we can come back down. So when we do plank, lower back is straight, but we need to engage our abdominals to get it there, yeah? And even more so when the legs go back. And that's hard, again, because you can't see yourself side on when you're doing your exercise. Let's address it in one more position, which is seated. Now we're seated on the floor, whatever position is comfortable with your legs, but most of the time we're seated in our chair, in our desk. And even myself, as someone who has done exercise for a long time, I can see myself leaning too far forward and possibly a little bit too straight with my back as an overcorrection. So when we sit up tall, we really should be vertical, as in ears, shoulders, hips in line, and possibly with a small curve in our lower back, because that's sort of placing our center of gravity from the head down through our hips. We want the curves in our spine, so a little bit of curve in our lower back, a little bit of rounding in our upper back, and then our head being held up. So use your mirror and try, straight back. Feels okay for a moment, but if you stay there for a few minutes, it would eventually get quite taxing to be there. If we had too much curve, straight away you can feel the back muscles working quite strongly. Where really we want to be sort of vertical or pretty vertical with some slight curves in our back. So move around and even hold each position for a few breaths. Notice what you feel there. Really we want to be sort of in the center, up nice and tall. But that's difficult to maintain. It's a lot of work for our back muscles, and then think unless you've got your computer right up very high at the right height, you probably do have to look down a little bit, and that over time rounds us forward. And as soon as our upper back rounds, well then we've still got to look at the computer, so we poke our chin forward as well. Now we don't have to sit perfectly neutral, upright all day. That's tough, yeah? Sometimes you might slouch for a little bit. Sometimes you might overextend for a little bit. Sometimes you might tuck one foot under and sit on one side. But having that check-in, so after a little while when your position gets uncomfortable, take a break. Maybe do a little bit of stretching, a little bit of moving, and then just reset your neutral position. Yeah? Even if you do good posture all the time, you're going to need to stretch and move to balance out all that time spent holding one position. So we want to be aware of good posture, we want to be aware of body tension, but also move often. Hopefully that helps. Use a mirror whenever you need to, or whenever possible really, when you're doing your exercise, to help you gain that body awareness of your spine.